All right, I'm going to call the Neary Building Committee meeting to order for Monday, July 15th, 2024. It is 7:09 p.m. The school committee has a joint posting with us, but I do not currently see a quorum at this point. So Chelsea or Roger, if you can let me know when Laura gets here, I'll pause to allow you to call your meeting to order.
Thank you.
Okay. First order of business was the meeting minutes. We had not received those for review, so we will go on to the next item. Subcommittee reports. I'm not aware of any finance, communication, or sustainability subcommittee meetings. So does anyone have any updates on those since the last week when we met?
No from finance.
Roger, sustainability?
No from sustainability.
And no from communications. Okay. With that, we are going to move on to a presentation from the school administration on plans for Neary students during construction. And I will make you a co-host, Keith, for you to share anything you want to share as part of this and turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jason. I do have a few slides I'd like to share with everyone. If you can stand by for 1 second. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. So thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity tonight to kind of share some of the updates we have around a Neary relocation proposal that's been worked on for the last couple of weeks. Certainly, as it became clear that the entire Neary site would be needed for the purpose of the project, we wanted to explore all the different avenues, and it especially relates to the relocation of Neary. So once that was made a task that was assigned to me, I enlisted the help of the Finn, Woodward, Neary, and Trotter administrations to review space allocation, make determinations, and forecast some challenges. And the main purpose was to determine whether feasibility of relocating Neary was an option for the proposed construction time of June of 2026 to August of 2028. And throughout that conversation, we did want to make sure that we had goals in mind as we work through it, was to ensure the integrity of the grade level experience for all students, to ensure student safety and minimize the direct impact of construction on students, faculty, and staff, and to ensure continuity for family and students. So we did consider 3 options as part of the work that we did. Option 1 was to relocate grades 4 and 5. And what that option was to push the grades down. As a result, Finn would have pre-K through 2. Woodward would house grades 3, 4, and 5. And the Trotter School would remain 6, 7, and 8. Option 2 was more of a split option. This would be to relocate grades 4 and 5. This would keep the Finn school the same, being pre-K to 1. It would add a grade to Woodward, which would be grades 2, 3, and 4. And then the 5th grade would be put up at Trotter for grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then the third option we came in mind was to remain at the Neary campus during construction with the current grade configuration. One thing we definitely wanted to make clear is that the district will maintain current staffing levels for K-5 in all 3 options. No positions would be reduced as a result of the relocation. The other thing we wanted to make clear from the get-go is in order for option 1 and option 2 to be viable, we would require some additional space. And it is in the infancy of this, but the proposal is to add 4 modular spaces or classrooms. 2 would be on the Finn campus and 2 would be on the Woodward campus. And the goal of that would be to ensure that we are aligning with the goal of safety and continuity and of the experience for students and staff. So as we work through the different options, we listed advantages and disadvantages of each. And this was more of a comprehensive conversation that we did have with many layers and thinking of what if scenarios that did occur. But for option 1, the advantages, and again, this is to relocate grades 4 and grades 5, which would have the Finn School as pre-K through 2, Woodward 3 through 5, and Trotter 6 through 8. The advantages would be to increase access to the construction site. So by relocating grades 4 and 5 to another school, the construction project can proceed more smoothly and certainly maximize flexibility where the new building would reside on the grounds of the campus. The second would be to decrease the amount of construction time, resulting in a cost savings, which is certainly a benefit, and improve safety and access for contractors. With students and staff off campus, there are fewer safety concerns and fewer logistical obstacles for the construction team. And a familiar environment for students and families. This option allows students to stay in their current school for 1 additional year, providing a sense of continuity and stability during the transition period. And the reduction of campuses, going from 3 elementary school campuses down to 2, would hopefully improve logistics for families and operations, while still meeting the goals of integrity.
Sorry, I just need to pause you because
No
the
problem.
school committee just hit a quorum, so
Got
I
it.
just need to let them call their meeting to order.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm calling the Southborough School Committee President Laura Kaufman, Roger Challen, and myself, Chelsea Malinowski. Thank you.
Back to you, Keith.
Thank you. And as for disadvantages for option 1, too quick. The disadvantages for option 1 would obviously be the impact to the host school. The school receiving the students will face challenges, and this is something that we did not take lightly. Certainly, there would be space and scheduling complications that would occur, and these disruptions can affect the overall experience for both students, faculty, and staff. Also adding a transition for grade 4, which would mean that they would return to the Woodward School for that 5th grade year. And certainly the resources and logistics related to any type of transition to make it successful would be a big investment on all of our parts. Certainly, we don't want to understate the impact that this would have on our specialists and the classroom and the spaces that they would be able to utilize. And certainly scheduling complications. I think that came up from the very beginning, but felt through some creative scheduling, it would be feasible, but still a disadvantage nonetheless. Option 2, I was able to fit the advantages and disadvantages onto one slide. And just to reiterate what this option is, this would mean more of a split where the Finn School would remain the same as it is now. Woodward would add the 4th grade. So it would be Woodward would be grades 2, 3, and 4. And the Trotter School would have grades 5 through 8. Like with option 1, the increased flexibility during construction cannot be understated, as well as the improved safety and access for contractors. That's certainly at the top of the list as far as advantages. The disadvantages, like option 1, would be the impact to the host school, as was previously mentioned. And then we added this disadvantage of the premature advancement of students. Advancing students, particularly from 5th grade to a new school, which would be up at Trotter for a year, can be challenging. The developmental differences between a 5th grader to an 8th grader would be something that would be a high level of challenge to navigate. And option 3, which would remain in the same configuration we have now, the advantages are pretty obvious, is that there'd be a continuity of programming, no change in grade level location, and the elimination of the premature advancement of students and an additional transition that would cause some challenges of concern. But the disadvantages, and this is where we did focus a lot of time and consideration, there'd be a significant decrease in the flexibility during construction. By working around a school in session, there will be additional challenges by completing the project safely and timely. Decreased options of where the building can actually be built on the grounds, and that's something obviously we've put a lot of time into over the last couple of weeks. There would be increased construction costs and the duration of the overall project because of the working around an active campus, and the increased distractions of noise to be able to educate students effectively. There would be restrictions related to outdoor space and traffic impact. That's something that would be obvious and ongoing. And the safety and access of contractors. Students as part of a construction site is never a good thing. So this would decrease the access of construction crews because we'd have to make sure that things were safe for the kids and staff. So as far as a closing for this, after an analysis of the available space at Finn, Woodward, and Trotter, the recommendation would be to move forward with the planning for option 1, which is to locate Neary School to Finn and Woodward. It does provide the most advantageous pathway to achieve the goals that we've outlined before, which is to ensure integrity of the grade level experience, to ensure student safety and minimize the direct impact of construction for students, faculty, and staff, and to ensure continuity as much as we can. In addition, the impacts. No one is shortchanging the challenge of this type of reorganization of our schools. So this would result in a very difficult few years, but certainly something I think that we can handle. I do want to remind folks, we have had major construction projects in Southborough Public Schools before. In particular, when we expanded the Trotter School, that construction project happened while we were in the building, and there were significant things that we had to overcome. If we were able to have moved to a different site, those certainly things would have been reduced. So I don't want to understate some of the impacts that this would have, including the additional transition for our grade 4, the logistics and resources that would be needed, and then the space concerns that are obviously would be apparent. Option 1 is viable for a short period of time for the 2 years of the construction period, and is certainly not ideal. And there are educational implications as highlighted above. So I do want to thank Kathleen, Steve, and Clayton and Gary for their work in helping us put this together. We did spend some time thinking through it, and obviously the benefits of option 1 certainly outweigh a lot of the disadvantage that we occurred, and we're up to the challenge. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Roger?
Keith, so the first bullet point, added transition for grade 4 in the 2026-27 timeframe by going back to Woodward. What does that mean again?
They in 4th grade, they would be advanced up to the Neary School, and then for their 5th grade year, that would be the transition year, and they would have to go back.
Okay, so when they were 5th graders, they go back. All right.
Correct.
Thanks.
It's tough to describe. It depends on when you start that sentence to how you end it. But yes, they would have to go back to a previous school.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Keith, I'm just going to have you pull down the slides for a moment. We can always bring them back up. if we
Gladly.
need to. Are there other questions from Neary Building Committee members? Are there questions from?
Jason, the
Okay.
only question I had is, I think this was the first we heard about modular classrooms. Are we factoring that into the budget yet? Or any of the costs associated with this?
Do you want me to take that? Just,
Go ahead, Jim.
yep. Yeah, so we factored in some swing space modular funds when we did our pass through the 3011 for the PDP. We will be now, if this gets approved, we will be reaching out to a modular provider for an interim early cost so that we can carry it now that we know the number of modulars.
And I assume we cannot use the current, to stay on the modular topic, we cannot use the current modulars at Neary and move those? Or are they too integrated with the utilities?
If I were to guess, Jason, because they have been there for over 20 years, that would be the case. That would be very difficult to have them relocated, but I'm not 100% positive.
All right, so Arrow Street, can you just run, Skanska, can you run that to ground as part of this process? Just eliminate that consideration or validate it?
Yeah, it's worth taking a look at for sure. But it's likely that, yeah, they wouldn't be able to be reused.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll chase that down.
All right, there's hands everywhere, but Kathy's the only one that has consistently stayed up without going back down, so it's her turn.
So 2 questions. When will we get the cost for the 4 modulars? Assuming the current Neary can't be used?
So we'll reach out. We should be able to get it in fairly short order. Now that we're seeing this information, we want to wait for it to get approved, and then, but we'll have it in time for the auctions decision.
Well, we need it before then, Jim. You need to get to the finance committee long before then, so we can factor this in. So the sooner the better. And then second, Keith, was it a unanimous vote by the group that looked at this to go with option 1?
Yes, it was. I think all of the administration would agree, including some central office staff, that this would be the most viable option to get us through. The disadvantage of moving prematurely to Taradia is certainly at the top as far as student experience and keeping that as connected and allowing families to remain connected to schools they already have experience with was the other driver behind that. But yes, we did have consensus on that, Kathy.
Good. Option 1 makes sense to me too, so I'm not surprised, but I just wanted to make sure there was no disagreement. Okay, that's it.
Kathy, and your point though on what the finance subcommittee is going to do before we get the formal cost estimates. I think we need to be careful, and I'd welcome Skanska's view on this. Is I get that modulars would be an incremental cost, but we also haven't factored in the shortened construction and or other costs. For example, we wouldn't have utilities at Neary for those two or 3 years, right? We're still going to have all the staffing costs, right? Like Keith mentioned, but there are other push and pulls. So I want to make sure we don't go too high or too low. So just ask that the finance subcommittee think about what levers you're going to pull as part of that interim update as compared to obviously the formal cost estimate, because we're going to have the formal cost estimate when we make a decision, which I assume would factor in each of those components once we get them. It just won't happen in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, so to be clear with what you just said, because that surprises me, you think the estimator is going to factor in, I know he's going to factor in the shortened construction period, I get that. He's going to factor in the cost of the modulars and the reduction in utilities at Neary in his estimate?
Well, that's what I'm saying is I think Skanska needs to, right? I don't care who does it, right? But I think when Skanska comes back to us with the full cost estimate along with Arrow Street, it needs to factor that in, right? Whoever the right person for that is, I don't think is a topic of discussion for this meeting, but I'm just putting it on the record that that's something that someone needs to come back with, because I think all of those things matter as we think about this.
Yeah,
I agree. We're trying to get everything we can so we really can determine the total cost, whether it's reimbursable or not. It doesn't matter. We need to know what the total cost is. But remember what a short window we've got here. We get the estimate on August 6th, right? So Finance Committee is going to meet on the 9th, the Friday. So we've got the 7th and the 8th, or I do, because, you know, again, 2 is a quorum. So I've got to sit down with Brian and hammer all this out in 2 days. So the more information I can get up front that I can look at and understand, the better I am. Even if it's piecemeal, if it's just one piece, I'd still rather get it, knowing that I've got that done, and then wait for the rest of it. But yes, I agree that, and I don't think the reduction in operating costs is going to be very big given the work we did 10 years ago, but it's something, it's a number. But the more I can get earlier, the better off I'm going to be as far as truly understanding it and getting that out of the way. Makes sense?
I think everyone's heard the message.
Okay.
All right, Mary Ann.
So a couple of things to think about. You would have operating costs now with the whatever modular classrooms you have there now, and then you would have operating costs, which it may end up being a wash. I'm not sure how many modular classrooms you have currently at the Neary site. And the second thing is maybe there's an opportunity to take those temporary classrooms, modular classrooms, and use them for construction trailers. So you just move them over, you save and your general conditions costs, we'll call it a wash, assuming it might be a similar operating cost. But I had an additional question, which was, in this assessment of 26 months, June 2026 through August 2028, was that an assumption for both enrollments? Whether it was a new school for 305 or a new school for 610, given that one school is bigger than the other and may take longer?
I can say that we did kind of try to split the difference based on what we're anticipating, knowing that things hopefully are done sooner than expected, but may run longer. So whether it is 2 years or it needs to be stretched out, it would be something that we would need to adjust to. But yeah, I don't think we really determined whether it was or wasn't based on the enrollment determination.
Well, certainly now that we know that the magic number is 4 trailers, this is something, Jim, we can engage a company to provide us some feedback on now. That's all I had. Thank you.
Denise?
And maybe this is a little premature, but I've been asked so many times, running into people in town, is where is the superintendent's office going? If we're gonna take Neary down, obviously, and not run it, where are you guys gonna go? Has that not been decided, Keith?
It has not been decided, Denise. We had some very, very preliminary discussions around that. But certainly that would need to be factored in. We did focus this preliminary talk solely on the schools and the students and the teachers.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Kathy?
So 3 quick things. So Marianne, the savings in utilities was the Neary school itself, not the modular. So that's what we're talking about. We might save a little bit of money. Second, when we looked at the construction timeline at a meeting, I think 3 meetings ago, there was a mistake on the one for the 305. It said 40 months. I don't think that ever got corrected. If it did, I'm not aware of it. And it was 26 months for the 610. So if now we think 305 is less, that would be great if that ends up being an option. And third, per Denise's statement, Southborough gets rent from the superintendent's office. Northborough pays us rent, and so does Algonquin, and we only pay 40% of Algonquin. So this is other revenue we're going to lose too, which will have to be factored in if the superintendent's office doesn't stay in Southborough, Keith. So hopefully we'll find a place in Southborough for it to stay. So
Understood.
okay, happy to help you. Find a
Appreciate
place.
Find a home.
Other questions on this topic from Neary Building Committee members? Mark?
Yeah, just a quick, I thank the committee for doing the hard work, the school group. It's not an easy thing to do. Just a 2-minute from the construction side, and having run construction projects for years while buildings were occupied, it's horrible. No matter how well you run a project, something's going to happen. So taking that huge safety issue out of this equation is all positive from the construction side. So to me, it's a no-brainer as to what direction we should go.
Chris?
Just to touch on what Mark was saying, another thing to consider is the 2 years of operation Neary would be and what other potential deferred maintenance or emergency repairs could come up to the building that you have to perform to keep the building, operable for the students, and just trying to take that risk right out of the situation. And like Mark said, working in construction with occupied school is not ideal. So.
Not sure how we get that number though, Chris. It probably is a number, but I don't know how you get it.
I'm sure there's some budget line items for repair on top of, the capital, their capital plan for the school that you just carry over for those 2 years, plus the additional operational costs, but.
I have one question, but I'm gonna go to the school committee first, and see if they have any questions before coming back to Neary.
Thank you. Roger, do you have any other questions you want to ask at this time?
No, I don't. Thank you, Chelsea.
Okay. And Laura, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. So I do have a few. What assurances do we have by going with option A that we would not have a delay when this building's supposed to be open and we go back to what the original plan is? I don't know who should answer that, but.
Well, I think from what we discussed, Chelsea, just thinking that, things and delays do occur, that we would build that flexibility in as best we could. And obviously stay in contact with the project closely to determine what things we need to do for the an additional time. I think that would be part of maybe some of the planning we would do between now and that point to make sure we were ready for whatever scenario was thrown our way.
And if I can just jump in too, Keith, obviously we'd be monitoring the schedule for construction. And as Keith said, delays do happen. The key understanding that we would have is the impact on the schools. So we would, well ahead of any delay, we'd be making sure that we were keeping the school administration up to date. And if there was going to be a shift in the schedule, it is well before the time when it would affect the school. So,
Okay, I mean, this is obviously not an ideal situation for educators to be teaching and students to be learning. I think we all probably on this call recognize that this is outside of the ordinary of what we're going to be expecting of our school system. I think given the situation, though, we're fortunate that we're able to come up with this option because I think living through construction is worse. But I do want to minimize the amount of time that we're expecting our district to go through this process. My other comment is more of a reiteration, Keith, of something that you said, is that the point of this is to minimize the impact on education during construction. It is not a cost-saving measure that, wait a second. Sorry, my kid just walked in. It's not a cost-saving measure for us to be looking at where we have any reductions possible through staffing or otherwise. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that this is truly what's the best option for our children and our educators, and recognizing that this is not going to be an easy lift from a planning perspective, an execution perspective, and kind of living through it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Laura, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, and just for everyone's own benefit, the school committee will be meeting next Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. to deliberate and vote on this. So if anybody wants to email the school committee on any feedback that they have, we're more than willing to take that into consideration throughout the next week. Thank you very much.
Kathy?
Is pre-K Northborough going to be asked to move to Northborough?
Yes, it would, Kathy. That was part of the additional plans that we were making, is that Northborough would be relocated back to the Northborough schools.
Chelsea, one thing to keep in mind as far as Finn, at least, I can't speak to Woodward. When Woodward was being built, the new Finn was reopened first, so they had, because my daughter was in Finn, so they had kindergarten, first and second in Finn at the same time, and I don't remember it being uncomfortable, crowded, whatever. It was a long time ago, and I don't know how many kids we had back then compared to now, but at least for that couple of years, it seemed to work fine.
I think the concern is around the specialists pushing in more than having their own classrooms. I think that that's, that can be challenging. I think it happens now at Finn, for certain specials. So I think that's going to be different than what we're doing today.
And the goal as we dig deeper into it, Chelsea, with that goal in mind, is that we would provide as much space as possible for the specialists, so they do have that, and we aren't putting those into any type of mobile situations, because that does reduce the impact. Although Mrs. Graziani was quite effective down at the Finn School on her cart for implementing world languages past year, but not ideal. And for this upcoming year, she will have her own classroom. So to speak to that, certainly it does have an impact. And I know that teachers will be challenged by it, but certainly if Mrs. Graziani is any indication, it can be done, but not ideal.
Agreed.
And I'll just go, and Keith, this is just maybe a request for you and the school administration is, I know you had a lot of access to the principals as you went through this, but if this is the plan that we move forward with, and, you know, to the extent it continues to garner any community support, I just ask that you think about working groups or focus groups with the educators within the schools to start thinking about how this would work. You know, we have the ideal, assuming everything goes to plan from a financial component, we still have, you know, almost 2 years to plan for how this would work and, you know, start beta testing a little bit before we're actually, you know, in the live situation. So just, you know, obviously the educators are going to feel it the most, in addition to our, obviously our children and students, but just, you know, continue the discussion and dialogue around this is, if this is what moves forward, just to make sure you're covering all your bases. I know that a ton of thought went into this, but obviously I'm sure there's a lot of ideas of how to make this work best. And I would like to, as the chair of this committee, continue to hear the feedback, regardless of what decision we make, the school committee makes, just so that we can try to troubleshoot and make the most effective choices possible as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I would absolutely agree that the work has just started. And all the principals would agree that that would be the priority moving forward. And the work that's been done so far was simply about the feasibility of the space, not necessarily how the space was going to be used. And the teachers' input on that is going to be incredibly valuable, as it was when, you know, Neary, Trottier was expanded in the early 2000s. I remember there was a variety of different ways for teachers to get input on the plan. And we would hope that we would start that work as soon as possible, if it were to be the course that we commit to going forward.
And my final comment along those lines, and I appreciate the consideration there, is I think we need to know how close we are, knowing the enrollments we have today, right? I realize there's probably a 1 year that we have uncertainty around, which are kindergartners that we don't have enrollment for yet.
Right.
But I think it's really important for the community to understand how tight this would be,
Yep.
right? And I don't think we're right when you start talking modulars, because obviously there are more macro concepts that go well beyond the scope of this committee, right? That could possibly happen, right? Additional housing within the community. You know, who knows what will happen with the economy, turnover with housing, et cetera. So I just think we need to be aware of how close it is, right? So we don't obviously create an issue, but also I think it's really important to show that it's not a sustainable path, right? And we need to keep the construction kind of as condensed as possible, not only from a cost perspective, but obviously an educational impact. So I don't expect the answer to that tonight, but I imagine the numbers are from the work that Kathy and I had done previously on that subcommittee in the single digits or 10, not, you know, 20, 50 or 100, but would like to see that on a piece of paper at some point.
Yeah, that would absolutely have to be dialed in and laid out. We did some preliminary work on that, and certainly would be part of what we would do showcasing going forward.
Thank you. Denise?
I also think that bringing the school committee on board and using their input on our website, because this is an issue that I think parents are going to want to know about, and I think that they can use our tool in communication, whether it's by getting out to the PTOs or whatever, or their impact or their decision-making process of what they think they want to do. And I do love the idea of keeping grade 5 away from Trottier. There's a big difference in 5th graders and 8th graders. But I think that the school committee could use our website to post stuff as they feel necessary. Do you agree, Jason?
I think the school committee can use their own communication avenues to the extent it goes to educational policy. I think we need to
Right, no,
make
I'm
sure we
talking about,
continue to separate the potential ballot vote on this project from
yeah.
educational
that-
policy.
That wasn't really what I meant. I mean, just the plan, the organizational, not educational
fair.
procedure, but the physical building. That's all I meant.
Yep. Kathy?
So a couple things. 2 meetings ago, when Greg and Keith first started talking about the different permutations that might work to move kids from Neary, if we thought that were the better course, Greg had stated in a public meeting that his goal was to move all of pre-K, Southborough and Northborough, to Algonquin. Is that off the table, Keith, at this point, at least for now?
It's not 100% off the table. It's still being considered. But we were able to work within keeping the Southborough pre-K at Finn and still have enough space, but with all the challenges that have been already described. So possible, but maybe not the best option. So that is going to be continued. Pre-K will be continued to be explored.
Who knows what's really going to happen at town meeting, but I do believe that this discussion we're having might be one of the more robust topics at town meeting as far as the impact on kids, especially parents that are sitting there at that meeting that know their kids are going to be part of the transition back to Neary or staying in Finn an extra year. So it's good we're starting to talk about this now because I do believe that will be a really important discussion to have probably at town meeting. The third thing is, have we looked, Keith, to see that the 4 modulars to each place will fit comfortably?
Preliminarily, yes, there are a variety of sizes. It's a lot of flexibility with the space when it comes to modulars. Obviously, the footprint at Woodward would have some restrictions with that. So yes, I think even any type of addition would provide us with a little bit of relief. I would imagine we do have more space at Finn than we do at Woodward for that purpose, Kathy. So I think variation inside will come into play.
Okay.
Okay. We are going to move on from this topic unless anyone has any further comments. Okay, is school committee staying in session or are you adjourning?
We'll adjourn.
All right, go ahead.
I move that the school committee adjourn at 7:47 PM. Is there a second? Roger seconded. Roger?
Yes, aye.
Laura? Aye. And Chelsea's aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to Skanska and Arrow Street updates. So first item, first time I had on the agenda was site analysis, continued discussion of outstanding questions, but we can really go in any order for any of the 5 listed items we have here. So Jim, Katie, how do you want to take this?
Hey, Katie, you can run through your slides first.
That's fine. We really have updates to the building options. It's not related to site questions.
Okay. Are there any items on the site that folks were expecting an answer on tonight?
Not tonight, but are we working closer to the perk test? I know there was some movement there, but I wasn't sure if we're still on track to get that before we have the selection option.
We have a contract signed. We're just arranging the dates.
All right, thank you.
And then I will add, and this will blend with meeting schedule, is next Monday night, if the committee so desires, the gentleman Tim from PAR that is very familiar with what is currently being monitored from the landfill site is available to join us, and we could have a 1-topic Zoom meeting on that. So to the extent that that is still of interest to folks, to understand the current and future monitoring of that site, we can certainly arrange that. If next Monday doesn't work, then we can certainly look at other dates. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us in our meetings this week, but I know that's an important topic to some or most of you. So wanted to at least make the option available. So before we move on to site, is that something people want to do? And or does next Monday work? Roger?
I did it again. So I think having that discussion, I think that's important to have. I'm looking to see if Mark's not gonna nod his head or Chris is gonna nod his head, but I think we need to have the discussion, so whether or not Monday works for folks or not, I don't know, it certainly works for me, but I'm not sure how you take a larger kind of sampling of that.
Are there any voting committee members that cannot make Monday? We would do 7:30.
I can make Monday work. That works on my schedule.
I'm fine.
Mark, give me a thumbs up. Andrew?
Depending on what time I get Dottie down, I might be late, but I should be able to join when she's down.
We will make sure it's recorded if you aren't able to join on time. All right, so we'll do a one-topic agenda next Monday night. Kathy, you're saying no?
I've got to go to a planning board meeting.
Okay, it'll be recorded.
You don't
So
need me. I'm fine with this. Let's go ahead.
okay. Okay. All right. So latest program requirements and square footage. So Katie, I think we did circulate the revised Excel workbook. There was one formula that was fixed in between. So can you just comment quickly on where we're at between the two scenarios on square footage wise, just so everyone's on the same page?
So let's see, the one error was on the 610 tab, as Andrew had pointed out. It was carrying over from a different summary effectively from the rest of the column. So currently our gross square footage is 62,820 for the 310 option and 100,667 for the 610.
Any questions or comments on that? Does anyone need any additional data from Arrow Street on that topic to inform any decisions?
So, I mean, are we gonna go into the detail of the spaces at all? I did see one other, typo on between the total and the under on the 610 for small group and testing spaces. It's just different between the new construction column and the total. But I think I still had some outstanding questions in terms of some of the spaces.
So I think we candidly need Greg and Stephanie for that discussion, unless anyone disagrees. Because I think they were the ones working on it with you, Katie, correct?
Yeah, and if it's a question about, is this the appropriate size, they would definitely be part of that conversation. We were working very closely with them on any of the nips and tucks of sizes of spaces. So, yeah, maybe could you possibly send your question to Jason in an email, and I can see if it might be a very straightforward answer?
Okay, yeah, I can work on something.
Yeah, if they are not questions that I think you can probably take that one offline, Andrew, to get comfortable with it or not comfortable. And we can bring it back to next week's meeting. I'll just carry this on the agenda.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, Kathy?
So to kind of add on to what Andrew just said, I've got a whole series of questions. I've gone through each line item. I've gone to the MSBA website. I've read some of their white papers on why you do things like a auditorium for a elementary school, So I've got a lot of questions. So I can piggyback what Andrew's going to do and get that. I almost had it ready for today, but I'm still not done. I spent literally 6 hours on this yesterday. So I've still got questions that I still think we can get some square footage out of this and not impact the quality of the education program that we're trying to achieve here. For example, I see no reason why extended day, the 500 square feet, 750 with the grossing factor can't come out. And I think Greg was maybe headed toward that. So I can add on my questions to Andrew's and get those to the team tomorrow. And not waste everybody's time tonight.
Okay. So then if you get them by tomorrow, then hopefully we can get them resolved for Thursday night or resolve them in the meeting on Thursday night.
That's the goal.
Okay, great. Any other questions on program requirements and square footage? So let's move on to the cost estimate page and just walk through, for everyone's benefit, the methodology that was used to come up with this, what's been considered, what hasn't been considered. And then, Kathy, I'd ask you to kind of, once they present this, comment on what the finance subcommittee may or may not do with this between now and Thursday, and then now in kind of the more formal decisions. So Jim, I don't know if it's gonna go first on this.
Yep. Yep. I will share my screen. Okay. So this mirrors Arrow Street's space summary totals. So at PDP, the 305 enrollment was 78,000, 610 was 121,067. The net reduction for the educational spaces, that's all the work that Greg and his team and Arrow Street have done, reduced the 305 by 11,130 and the 610 by 16,351. One thing to note, we are backing the auditorium out. That will be carried as an ad alternate, but we're backing that out as well with this calculation. So I think Katie had just said the revised square footage of 62,820 for the 305 and 100,667 for the 610. So that a total project cost, including soft costs, that resulted for the 305 in a reduction of 12,999,165 and 15,943,590. So any questions on the reductions before I jump into the budget numbers? We got there. Okay. All right. So next, what we did was we took the ranges that were submitted in the PDP of 106 million to 110 million for the 305, and the 610, the 142 million to 148. We took a median value between those. For the 305, that was 108, and the 610 was 145. And then we backed this out with soft costs for a new estimated value of 95,835 for the 305, and the 610, 129,056,410. Then we are again using an assumed effective rate of 18% for the 305. That was just over 17 million, and the 610 just over 23. So that gets you to a town share for the 305 of 77.9 million, and the 610 105.8 million. So the big caveats on this that are stated here below. So this is prior to a formal estimate. This is just taking out the square footage, doing the calculation with that cost per square foot. And the values are based on the square foot reduction only. There are lots of other variables in estimates that the estimator next week, when they get going on the formal estimate, will factor in. So duration, site work, all of that remain the same. We are just reducing the square footage. And obviously the MSBA reimbursement, the effective rate of 18%, that isn't finalized anyway, either. So that's subject to change as well. That isn't finalized until the project funding agreement and ultimately the final audit. And also soft costs were assumed. Values were assumed in our estimates only. So again, that's subject to change. So turn over to questions.
Andrew?
Jim, for soft costs, how are they baked in here? Are we using the same numbers we had before? Or are we
So-
using a percentage?
We're using a percentage.
Okay.
So in what we did with the savings, we assumed 20%. For these numbers, we were assuming a little bit of a higher cost, but to be on the conservative side, we're assuming the lower 20% soft costs.
Okay, so this is a 20% soft cost for everything?
20% soft cost on the savings.
Okay, but we're still using 25 on the other piece?
Correct. So as we go through this estimating process and put the soft costs together and, baking in the modulars, we're going through a more detailed review of the soft cost in preparation for when we receive the estimates.
Okay, yeah, I think that my research, our soft costs were a little bit, they average around 20. So I think
Yep.
our 25 might have been a little too conservative, but hopefully we'll get that back from the estimator.
Yep.
Other questions related to where this is at? So I guess Kathy or any finance subcommittee member, is there any work that's going to be done with this between now and Thursday?
The answer is yes. On Thursday, I don't want to say a lot tonight, Jason, because I don't want to say something that I turn around and have to correct. So I'm going to make a couple general statements. What Andrew just said is true. If you look at the last big group of projects funded by the MSBA, the average soft cost is 21%, not 25. 4% is a lot on this project. So it's my understanding that the estimator is not going to estimate soft cost. Am I wrong?
Jim?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get off mute. Correct. We're going through the 3011, the MSBA budget. And once we get the durations and some of that other information from the estimate, we're going to be building that into the 3011. So yeah, we are putting those numbers together. And yeah, the 20 versus 25%, we were definitely conservative early on in the PDP.
Jim, we just can't afford to be that conservative. I mean, it's 5%, it's $5 million. So I don't know what you just said. I truly don't about the 3011. Is the estimator going to estimate soft cost when he comes back with his estimate on August the 6th?
No, he is doing construction costs only.
Okay.
And
So then so Stanska can then estimate the soft cost once that's done, or?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So we carry a percentage for design fees. We carry a percentage for OPM, and then some of those other pieces and parts, swing space. Now we have that information, the moves, we understand more about the moves with Keith's presentation earlier on in the meeting. So all that's going to be factored in when we put those budget lines in.
Okay, so we'll have that simultaneously with the estimator's cost on the 6th, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so that's one general comment I'm making. Again, I'm not being specific. Second general comment is I think the 18% is also low, and I've done a lot of work on that. I hope I'm right. I'll know more Thursday. So Jason, I will have some more information on Thursday. I just don't want to be specific right now because I've got some work. I've got some work to do. Let me just say that.
Okay.
And so I do the best I can to provide some additional information, but our real goal is to meet on the 9th and have a whole new set of projections ready to go for the meeting on the 12th. So that's where we're really headed. But I'll do what I can for Thursday.
So I will put a simple request, and I don't think this is going to surprise you, is without doing any more work, I just need someone to run an updated, if you just accepted all of the assumptions that are currently on the screen, what does the 77.9 mean for the average home in Southborough? Over, you picked the bond term based on how you're all thinking about it from a select board and advisory perspective. And what is the 106, let's call it? What does that look like? Use round numbers even if you want. Just because what I'm trying to understand to help start to inform my decision is the base cost of entry, like, is that too much right off the bat for the 305 enrollment? And then what are the economies of scale between the 305 in the 610, to try to weigh that against potential future projects that would be needed at Finn if we kept the 305 enrollment.
Yes, I will definitely do that before Thursday. And let me just add, for those that are thinking that 610 is where their vote may be heading, or at least it's still in the consideration, I don't see how, and this may not be the building committee, but at least the people on this committee that are on other committees that make financial decisions, select board, advisory, et cetera, capital. I don't see how we don't consider as part of the decision what happens to Finn in this. So we can talk about that later, but I still think that's got to be part of this. You can't leave the building like it is and just do this in a vacuum. So Jason, yes, I will have your numbers for you on Thursday.
Thank you. Anything else from you, Kathy, before I go to Denise?
No, I just don't want to say much more tonight.
That's fine. I'll add the same agenda topic for Thursday. You'll be covered. All right, go ahead, Denise.
I agree that median cost is a good thing, but I think this should be more than the median cost, because I think people, if the median cost today in this town is 900,000, which I've heard, people are fixated on that, and their tax rate and their tax implication could be a lot less. So I think, Kathy, maybe at least 3 benchmarks, or at least 2 benchmarks. You know, a lower end house, you know, that maybe a senior citizen has versus the median of 900,000, because all they do is get fixated on that one big number. And I don't want that to happen. Because I run into people who say, well, you know, I'm going to, you know, and all houses in town are not 900,000. So I don't want people to get scared.
Okay, I hear you, Denise.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on cost? All right, so Jim, I will have you pull that down. And we will go to our next agenda topic, which is updated planning studies. So Katie, I think we're over to you.
Could you give Andrew Plum
I
screen
can.
share?
All right, I think I can do this. Let's see. Okay, is this showing up okay for everyone?
It is.
Great. So what we've done since we met last week was we took the C1 and C4 options that we were looking at, which had started to sort of shift the building onto the existing Neary footprint. And we decided to see how much overlap we could get in each case to try to understand what would be the sort of maximum overlap of each approach, which I will walk everyone through. We also looked at, there was some discussion last week about in the C1 option, a 3-story version, which was presented versus discussing a 2-story option, which was brought up by Greg. And we did have some preliminary kind of high level back and forth with the cost estimator about what that sort of difference might be, which I can speak to. And then the last piece that I'll talk about is in the 2 C4 options, that's the 610 size school. We just looked at sort of there's a a version that placed the media center up on the second level. And we just calculated sort of what that meant in terms of overall footprint touching the ground, which I'll walk everyone through. So to start with the C1, what we're showing here, and you should be able to see in each of these cases, we've tried to include the outline of existing Neary. We looked at taking this L-shaped mass, which has the sort of shared public spaces oriented on one side and the academic spaces on the other, and aligning it with the footprint of Neary as a way to, our hope is that the soil that's below the existing Neary is in better shape than what was found, for example, under the athletic fields. And so I will go to a first floor plan here. The extent of the Neary footprint is where I'm trying to kind of highlight the corners of that. So it mostly fits atop the existing Neary footprint in this version. It's otherwise a very similar sort of layout and plan to what we saw last week, but what's changed is sort of the orientation of it. Last week it was sort of at an angle. So in this version, we'll see that we get almost a complete overlap of the two. I will say that in the scenario where I'm going to go to the second floor for this one, here you can see in the 3-story option that we basically have the 4th grade on the second floor and then the 5th grade on the 3rd floor. If we were to go to a 2-floor option, one likely scenario is that, and I'll try to draw this on the screen, is that this bar, which is currently this size, would basically grow by about that much in order to fit it all on one level. Now, whether it simply just extends in one direction or it has some other shape is something that we could look at if it's desirable. But the feedback from PM&C was that the 3-story arrangement is somewhat less expensive than the 2-story arrangement. And at a high level, the sort of additional foundation costs of the 2-story are sort of offset by the steel costs. So that was sort of a wash. But there was higher roofing structure and roofing materials costs. There was several factors that kind of went up and down between the two. But the net result was that the 2-story was somewhere in the ballpark of about $630,000 more, than the 3-story option. Now that's something that we would want to discuss and get feedback from Greg and Keith on, because the feedback last week was that educationally the 2-story option is preferred, and what we're looking for is sort of direction in terms of what we, with this C1 option, what we end up pricing. So I maybe will run, well, actually, does anyone have any questions about this one before I run through the other updates on C4?
Go ahead, Kathy.
So Jason, keep me honest here. Andrew, I don't think the last meeting is where Keith and Greg said 3-story is more ideal education-wise. They said it at the working group. So I don't think this group knows that Keith and Greg strongly feel that the 2-story option is better than the 3-story option education-wise.
Yeah, I'll keep you honest on that. That Greg, I know, is tied up in another meeting tonight, but he has indicated from an educational perspective, 2 stories is far more ideal than 3. And they did denote that they have toured some 3-story elementary schools. I think the Boardwalk campus in Acton was the one that was cited to help inform some of those decisions.
And I think, Jason, he said there was a little bit of buyer's regret there as far as changes they had to make subsequent to deal with some things that the 3 stories cost. So I think I thought at the working group meeting, he was strongly suggesting that they want 2 stories and not 3.
Yeah, and I don't think he's had the benefit of hearing the cost estimate yet. So I think that might be depending on where the committee's reaction is to what Andrew has presented here, Greg, and the team can come with any additional thoughts. Obviously, we can give him a reaction from tonight's meeting, but I think he should make his statement to the full committee of why, we've heard 3 costs less, right? But 2 is educationally their preferred direction. So help, and then let the committee figure out where they want to go from there based on that feedback. But I don't want to try to paraphrase it here. All right, Andrew, I don't see any more hands,
Okay.
so you can keep going.
Okay, I will bring it back up.
It's already up on our side, just so you know.
Great, thank you. So this is the C4, the first version of the C4 scheme that we've been looking at. We've been calling this one the sort of horizontal option, just because the general grain of it seems to run from sort of left to right on the site. And what we've done this week from last week was that we shifted it over to see here. Let's see if my cursor will show. We sort of aligned it to the edge of the existing Neary building to see how much of the footprint of this version would fit atop the existing footprint. It's about half. You can see that we didn't feel comfortable with shifting the building any further north south to the west, which is page north, sort of page up. Than this. There are, of course, some pushing and pulling that could happen, but just to give you a kind of a broad brushstroke of how much overlap we can achieve with this sort of arrangement, it seems to be about 50% of this this layout. And again, the organization of this scheme is that it has the academic classrooms on the page north side of the plan. Each sort of wing is a grade level, and so we're seeing grades possibly 2 and 3 on the first floor and 4 and 5 on the second as an option, with the media center being the sort of connecting element to the more public and shared spaces, which are page south in this drawing. One of the things that changed in shifting the building atop the existing Neary was that you might recall that last week the parking was sort of more consolidated on the left-hand side, and what starts to happen is that we will starts to potentially stretch out around the building. This is all very preliminary, and it's really just about showing options for having 2 separate loops for car and bus drop-off and parking. So I know that there's a lot of discussion still to be had on sort of making the parking and access ideal. And I'll just quickly go to the second floor. Has the 2 other grade levels, so that's how we get the sort of 610 enrollment. It's 2 levels of the academic classrooms. Now I'm going to just quickly look. So this is where we were. This is so to compare that to the alternative C4. This one, in the last time you saw it, it had actually been rotated 90 degrees so that these classroom wings were actually pointing page north. Here we were looking at, again, trying to maximize overlap with the existing building. And you can see that this is the corner of the existing Neary building. And, I'd say we're getting, again, about half, maybe slightly more. And again, pushing and pulling on the plan is still something which can and will happen if this is the direction that we decide to go in. But one thing that's different in this scheme, and I'm going to go now back to the 3-dimensional view, is that we've located the media center on the second level. And what that allows us to do is to have a slightly more efficient footprint in terms of what touches the site. And the difference between the footprint of this alternative C4, and I'm going to just switch back to this one, it's about 9,000 gross square feet. The building itself is not smaller by that much, but that's in terms of what's touching the ground. We've essentially taken, a portion of it, which is the media and circulation that's associated with that, and raised that up onto the second level. So we think that, if you're comparing these two C4 options, it's likely that this more consolidated footprint would be worth some amount of savings. We did not review with PM&C, but from some of the information we got on the C1 option, I think we can assume that there's some savings there between these two. And just to show everyone on the second floor again, this has the again, each grade level gets a wing, and then the media center is located on the second level. So I will stop there for questions on these two schemes. And again, just a reminder that our hope is to get direction from the building committee on which one to sort of price.
And have you received any feedback from the school administration?
Not yet. Unless Katie, I think, no. So I don't know if they've had a chance to review it closely yet.
Not since the working group. This might be a good time to jump in. Jim and I were planning to also talk about, there had been a desire on behalf of some folks here to have, as we go forward, looking at the different options, a sort of a decision tree in order to weigh different aspects of the different options. So we'll be beginning those conversations. We thought we would start that discussion today. It's by no means meant to be final, but we know that there are different aspects of each of the different scenarios that we wanted to start to summarize, so that as you're going towards a decision after we have the estimates back, you could start to weigh the different pros and cons of each of the different options. And part of that will be the educational plan. So as far as the question of input from the educators, that will come into play then.
So I think, speaking personally, for me to make any help, narrow down the options, I need to hear two things. One is I'm not an educator. I'm not going to be operating in the school. I need to hear what their views are and whether there's pros or cons with it. And then, assuming all else is equal and they're indifferent on that, is there cost benefit or other items as part of your decision tree that doing it one way may look, quote unquote, better, but cost us $1 million more. I think we obviously know where the committee would probably land on that, versus it's going to cost $500,000 more to do this, but then there's a quantifiable educational component to it, right? Like, we need to understand that. And I realize you're not going to be able to get down to that nitty-gritty detail, but I need to hear, I'll call it, experts' opinions on how they would operate in the space. And I know we have the principals on the phone here, right? And I don't know how much they've had a chance to look at these. I realize it's the middle of the summer as well. So I would like to hear that before I personally vote on anything. But obviously, if there's something cost-wise that we should be considering as part of that, I think we're expecting you to raise that and flag that as well.
Yeah, and to Katie's point, and I can share it if needed, or we can send it out so folks can take a look at it and discuss it further on Thursday. But we put all the options in the rows, and then the columns are different considerations. So just to your point, Jason, if one has a cost benefit, but it may impact the educational program, that's all in one place. So we can share that out and maybe further discuss that on Thursday.
Great. Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jason, doing the cost, kind of cost benefit. If I remember correctly, the alternative was a little bit smaller in the square footage. Is that still the case?
In the overall square footage, it's equivalent. It's just in the footprint. So the amount of square footage that's touching the ground. So, excuse me, that just means a little bit less foundation work.
Okay. And if we don't go forward with an auditorium, how would that kind of change the overall? Like I'm looking at on the screen right now, like I'm assuming like the media would basically take place where the auditorium is, and you would just make the hallway more narrow or something. But would that, like, do you have an idea of what a no auditorium would do to the kind of layouts?
I mean, I don't have an alternate layout to show you, but for sure, removing the auditorium would be removing or reducing the footprint that's touching the ground and the amount of foundation work versus having one. So thank you for the reminder. In each of the versions that we showed last week and again this week, we've shown them with an auditorium. I understand that it's going to be dealt with as an add alternate, but we wanted to include it in these options just to see how it might play out.
Yeah, I think it would just be good to know, like, if that is trying to get the auditorium and the media in is kind of going to be constraining or difficult to do with the amount of classrooms we have, right? It just, like, I don't know if the space in the classrooms versus the other spaces is equal and the auditoriums are throwing it off kind of thing. But it would be good to know kind of like if the auditorium removal would be beneficial besides just the net square footage.
I just want to make sure I understand your question fully. So beneficial in what regard? I mean, if the auditorium is removed, certainly it's reducing the footprint of the building by some amount.
Yeah, I mean more of if you were stacking the building, right? And if you wanted everything but the classrooms per se, I'm just hypothetical on the first floor, right? But the classrooms are 50,000 square feet and everything else with the auditorium is 55,000, right? Then there's a inefficiency in terms of stacking one block on top of the other, that removing the auditorium would then fix the inefficiency, if that makes any sense.
I understand. Yeah, I think one thing to point out in the case of all of the options that we've been exploring is that they're sort of independent in that we're not showing classrooms being built or stacked atop the auditorium space or the sort of larger public shared spaces. And so it's not that if the auditorium was removed that we would somehow get a more dense packing. It's just that if we just imagine that we've got these sort of shared public space bars up the plans that I was showing, those would tend to condense and get not as long, and so we would have that much less foundation that would have been going to the auditorium, and there wasn't spaces planned for being located on top of that.
Gotcha. Okay.
You good, Andrew? For now?
Yep. Thanks.
Denise?
Yeah, I think speaking of the auditorium, I think it would also be good to know, keeping or eliminating that, how it's going to impact the tax rate. Because if it's something that the town feels very strong about having one, then they should know what the implication is to the final tax number. Because I think it's really important to understand when you start taking things away or adding things, what it's going to do to the tax rate.
And Denise, we agreed at a prior meeting to carry that
I'm sorry.
that particular item separately. So
Okay.
I think basically we're doing that. So I think we're good.
Right. Okay.
And we're gonna, I think at least as of now, there's been discussion of letting the voters make a separate decision on that
Correct.
particular topic.
Yep.
Okay. You have more slides, Andrew?
I don't. I have just the B4 option available if there was desire, but there's been no changes on that. That was the sort of ad reno option. So I'm all set.
Questions on where we're headed? It sounds like we need that decision tree. And it sounds like we probably need a discussion of 2 versus 3 with the superintendent present. And then we need a broader educational view of some of these scenarios to help narrow them down if cost was neutral. Did I miss any to do on that? That anyone wants to see?
I mean, I don't, it's probably too late or we can't do it, but in terms of now that it's on the existing school, is there any part of the existing school that's salvageable? Right. I think right here, we're just, the assumption is raising it to the ground. Nothing is reusable. Versus, is there anything, is there an existing space that could be an auditorium that we could save the structure or something, just trying to be efficient with the space as much as possible? Or is that kind of throwing good money after bad, trying to tie the old with the new, and it's more cost efficient to just scrap the whole thing and start fresh? But I figured it was worth at least playing devil's advocate and asking if that's a possibility.
I think I was going to say, I'll jump on that, Jason. So in looking at the B4 scheme, we tried very carefully to keep as much of the building as we could, and we talked about that last week. I think it's hard, the amount of upgrades you need to keep a portion of the building becomes pretty expensive compared to constructing new. And so you're sort of creating this, what's your cost of efficiency or effectiveness on it? In other words, you could say, well, we could convert the existing gym into an auditorium, and then you realize, well, we've got to upgrade the structural system on that, and we've got to upgrade all the building systems. And are you ending up with a space that works well as an auditorium, or are you ending up with a gym that's been converted? And I think it's hard to know precisely what those dollars are. We have tried to, in the B4 scheme, put those together in a way that preserves as much of the existing building as we can, and see where the costs run on that. And I would say one of the tricky things is the auditorium planning. I think there's a couple schemes where we've got it kind of at the end of one of the pieces of the building, and if we snip it off, it's a little easier to imagine than, as Andrew Plum was pointing out, if it's buried in the current plans in the heart of the school. If we decide not to proceed, we got to reconfigure things to get that space reallocated.
Yeah, no, I mean, the B4 is basically just keeping as much of the building as you can and adding to it, right? I'm basically saying, let's design a brand new school, but keep some of the existing one. And then, again, I don't know, to your point, like, okay, maybe you make the gym into an auditorium and it works well. But then we would also get some, maybe not if it's an auditorium, I don't know, but we would get some reno bonus points on our reimbursement, right? So I'm just basically saying, brand new school at the same site, is there any piece that we can keep, especially to help us with the matching additional points? Even if it was, cost as much to make it up to code as it would to build new, but to get the extra reimbursement, it might be worth, getting creative, but just throwing that out there.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions on anything we've heard thus far? Okay. Let's talk about meeting schedule just to make sure we're on the same page. So we're basically going to have a repeat of this agenda with the to-dos for Thursday night. That meeting is scheduled for Thursday night. We will then have a meeting on Monday night at 7:30 with the pure topic of hearing from the engineer related to the landfill. You also heard the school committee is meeting at 9 a.m. on Monday morning to it's a regular meeting, but there will be a Neary Building Committee update. So I am planning to go and make a status update presentation. I do plan to post in case we have a quorum. So there's no requirement to be there, but to the extent others want to join, obviously Roger will be there. I'll be there. So I will put that on everyone's calendar. That would be a school Zoom, not a town Zoom. And then obviously we would follow the schedule from there. I will send out the latest schedule. It does not have those Monday meetings on it. So Jim, maybe if you could just add those two on there and then I'll recirculate it. I think that would be helpful just to avoid issues, and I will send the invites for the Monday meetings.
Yep, I can do that. Katie actually already updated the calendar. She doesn't mess around.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right. So just I need a copy of it. Is there any public comment? Okay, we've already talked about meeting schedule. Is there any other business that anyone wants to conduct tonight? All right, I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mark,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
Roger appears to have disappeared unless he's hiding. I'm gonna skip over him. Chris,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
and I know Kathy left, so I'm I as well. So that's a 5-0 vote. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night,
night.
everyone.